So in this particular lesson, we're looking mainly at the whole idea of managing all of these large number of lookups. Like you can clearly create a controller for each one and all the associated views, but it's a little irritating to the user, the end user. If they go into each one, there's only like one piece of information to maintain on each and every one, right? So it's actually much nice for them to build a user interface that kind of brings it all together into a single view that you can work from. So we're going to look at two different methods. A preferred method, and well, that's my preferred method, and an alternate method as well. But just before we get into that itself, I want to go back and revisit something we've been doing some work with and suggest we make a few final improvements. I say final until I come up with even more ideas. But what happened the other day, if I click this 13.0, a student asked about that awkward at the top of the delete view. It would say this question: are you sure you want to delete, this or something like that, right? Clearly it needed some improvement. So I got thinking about that along with some other changes I wanted to make to our custom controllers. So I'm suggesting that we switch. It's not too much trouble to make this switch, and I think you'll find it's worth the extra time and trouble involved, right? So actually, I'm going to bring it up in Visual Studio, and I have my copy paste file over here in Notepad. So let me just get Visual Studio up here. So right now in our custom controllers, we have the two. We have our cognizant, our self-aware controller, and the elephant one. The elephant one we don't need to touch. It's fine the way it is for what we want to do. But let me just get my new code here for the custom controller for the self-aware version. And actually, this is a bit of a simplification in some ways compared to what I had in the last version, right? So actually, let me just select it all. I should have shrunk it down and done it all at once. That would have been faster. Okay, there we go. So I've added a couple things. So this is the same. We're just getting the controller and action names from the route data values, right? I added this a little because we've started sometimes to use controllers where we use camel case, right? Where we just stick a couple names together and, just capitalize the first letter. It's fine. It works very well from a logical point of view, but it doesn't make very good text to be displayed on the user interface. So I added this little method here to just split anything camel case into separate words, just using regex replace. We find a capital letter from A to Z and replace it with a space in whatever the letter was, right? And then we trim off any extra white space around it at the end. Okay, so we're going to use that in here. So basically, all I'm doing in these parts is we're adding some bunch of information to view data to make it available if and when we need it in the view, right? So the controller name, now this new friendly name is where we just split it into camel case. Now, if it was just a single word like condition, that's fine. It won't hurt it at all, right? But it gives us a guarantee that if we use the friendly name, then if it was a camel case name, then it's going to be spread out into separate words. Of course, our action name, and here is where we're putting the title into the view data. So with a combination of controller name and action name, we found that was a nice way to actually provide that to the sort of the tabs in the top of the browser, right? Okay, so that's a bit of a simplification because we no longer have to worry about looking for those return URL values, right, that we generate in the Elephant controller because we're going to handle that in a different way altogether. So I'll just save this change here. We don't have to worry about the Elephant controller, but if we come down to the views, and in particular in the shared folder, that view heading, right? So this is all set up, and here's where we're going to address that problem of the delete. So I'm just going to down grab my code for this because I have an updated version for this to go along with that change we made there. And this addresses the issue we were just talking about there on the delete page, right? So notice I've changed it as well to, if we're just displaying the name, I'm always using that friendly name for the controller, right? But of course, if we're building a link to go back to the actual application, we use the proper controller name, not the friendly version. But here's where we're adding another else if, checking for the delete action, which also might have the alias remove, right? That's why we're handling both. And then what we're going to do here is we're going to prepare. I'm going to go on the assumption that, I'm going to do this more and more. In fact, next time I teach the course, I'll probably say that this is probably good practice to do in all of your models. Add a summary property, something that kind of meaningfully represents, the information to talk about a given instance of an entity, right? If there's a summary property there, then we're going to say, are you sure you want to delete, and use the summary property name, right? And that would be good for like a full name or anything else. Okay. If there isn't a summary property, then we'll just say, are you sure you want to delete this, and describe whatever it is, condition, meal type, whatever, right? Things like that. Okay. So that's the little change there. So I check if there is a summary property, yay, then we'll just use that. Otherwise, I'll just use the controller friendly name, right? And that's what we're going to say. Are you sure you want to delete? Okay, the appropriate name. So that's just the little change here. Everything else is the same, just how we handle delete. But we're going to do something we hadn't done before, and that is add another view here, another partial view, which I'm going to call my back to list. Because so far, what we've been doing is we've been going around and replacing that back to list link that originally gets scaffolded on each one of our views, right? And replacing it with a customized one that was suitable to the way we were working in that particular controller. So if we needed to do our return URL business to remember the sort, filter, and page parameters, then that's what we put in place. So instead, we're going to make one partial view that will have the logic in it to give us a proper looking link in multiple situations, right? So I'm just going to grab the code, we'll get it in here, and we'll look at what it does. So this handles now actually four different situations. Now this business of the lookup, we're actually going to do that today. That's coming up in the lesson we're about to start. So kind of ignore that one for now. We'll come back and look at it later, right? In the else branch of that, if it's not a lookup, then what we're going to do is check, do we actually have a controller name? So maybe they're just still using the standard controller, not even our cognizant controller, the self-aware one, right? And in that case, they're just going to get the generic back to list link, right? I just changed the name a little bit so that we don't accidentally replace this one with other search and replace operations. Okay, but if we do have a controller name, then we also check, do we have a return URL? In that case, we use the version that gives all the information to go back to the controller index using the proper parameters for sort, filter, and paging. If we have the controller name but not that, then we'll give this version of our back to list link, right? So at least show the friendly name of the controller. So at least it's customized, it's not looking the same on every page. So that gives us, multiple different ways to handle this. So what I'm suggesting is, especially if we hadn't been mucking around with them already, then we could just do a quick find and replace on the standard one. And what we want to replace it with is this partial, right? That's what we're going to put from now on as the back to list link. So I'm going to copy that for now. Let me just come to any of our views that I know I'm doing the return URL on, like down here, right? So I'm going to highlight this. So when I hit Control H on the keyboard, right, that's filled in the find, and I'll put my partial view in the replace. And I'm going to do this throughout the entire project, right? And I'm going to do it all. So there should be, look at that, 12 occurrences replaced. So now it'll just use my partial name back to list, and away we go. All right. So it'll handle all the different cases. Now, that was 12 replacements. If I think about it, I have appointment. Okay. So on these ones, okay, it replaced it here as well. And we did all the ones for doctor, and it did all the ones for patient, right? So that's all I really have to worry about at this stage. So now they're all using my back to list. All right, good. Now, I did also make that change. Let me just close up some of these to the view heading. The only one that's really affected are our delete views. So let me just come into those three. I'll just get them all open at once, right? Now, I'm not going to do a search and replace here, but basically all we have to do here, we already have the view heading. So this is no longer needed, right? So I'll just take that out basically on each one, because that's now a part of our view heading, right? It'll give the appropriate prompt there at the top of the delete page. Okay, and that's all the changes I actually have to make to update the whole approach to use this new and revised, new and improved, better uh, um, version of our uh, custom controllers. Okay, so that's basically it. So I'll just run it quickly so we can see that it's actually working and doing what it should do. Okay, so here I come to it. Now, of course, I want to make sure, right, that it works properly. So if I come to, well, hey, let's go for broke here. Apply a filter, right? Good. I want some paging though. So I'll go back to all specialties and I'll look for something in the name. So I've got at least a couple pages. So I'm going to come over here and let's go to the details. Now my back to list link, look at, I can even see it in the little thing that pops up at the bottom. Yep, it kept all of our parameters, so that's good. It's working fine here. If I go to the delete, see, now, are you sure you want to delete this doctor? Okay, that's fine. It's just using now if I had the summary property in place, maybe I'll do that. Let me come here to the class. Uh, got to be able to see the Solution Explorer here. So if I come to the doctor class, the model, right? So I have the full name and I have the formal name. I could actually just steal one and start calling it summary, but that will probably give me some build errors at this point in time. So, I could just simply do something like this. Actually, I could just make it public string summary, and I won't bother with that. I'll just go this little shortcut, the lambda expression, full or formal name. Full name, right? Ah, there we go. So we've added a summary property here. It's read only, right? Just returning the full name. So it's kind of duplication, but I can live with that for now. It's not really hurting the system much, but if I do a hot reload, bring up the browser again, and you see now it says, are you sure you want to delete, and uses the full name of the doctor because it is now the summary property, right? So with some, planning and foresight, I could easily do that for, all kinds of situations, just adding that summary property. But sure enough, our back to list link is working fine on all of our different situations, right? And it has nice user friendly names showing up everywhere. So that's good, even here on the delete and so on. All right, so I'm happy with that. Okay, let's move on to the next part of the lesson.